So in the personal development world, in the self-help world, on the internet and on YouTube, people talk a lot about Carl Jung and Jungian psychology, and they bring up, conscious versus unconscious quite a bit. And when I first started getting into that kind of stuff, I kind of had a hard time understanding like the difference between conscious and unconscious. Um, it's like the easiest way of seeing it is when you're conscious, you're deliberate and intentional. And when you're unconscious, living an unconscious life, you don't know why you have the thoughts you have or take the actions that you do or say the things you say. And you never really stop to contemplate why you see things that way. And so being conscious to me is about trying to figure out if you see reality for what it is. And if you can actually notice when you're biased, and catch yourself. And by the way, this isn't going to be like a Carl Jung video. This isn't going to be like a Jungian psychology video. There's plenty of those out there. This is just my perspective. So this isn't really, there's no right or wrong here. This is just kind of how I see it. I got really confused when I got into Jung because I heard that he said in one of his books that like the process of individuation, the process of becoming conscious, is a moral endeavor. Like it actually is like you're a good person if you're conscious. Like you are doing something immoral if you remain unconscious. Like in terms of the greater good. And I kind of had a hard time understanding that because growing up we're so brainwashed to think that if you are not like physically hurting someone, that bad behavior isn't necessarily bad. Like you can kind of do whatever you want as long as you're not hurting someone. So since we have that kind of forced down our throat, and I used to have that mindset, I had a hard time understanding like, so how is it a moral endeavor to try to become conscious and to try to individuate? But as I've gotten older, I've realized that every action you take to deliberately work on yourself intentionally, it's almost like that action cultivates certain good energy that you will then have inside of you. And if you cultivate enough of it, if you make enough deposits, then when you need to make a withdrawal, it's there. And so I believe that the reason Carl Jung said that it was a moral thing, like actually it was about principles and character and being a good person, the process of, becoming conscious. I believe because as humans, for whatever reason, we need that energy. Like we just can't survive without it. So I believe that if you don't cultivate enough of it within yourself, the only way you can get it is to siphon it from other people. And that's why, in my opinion, very negative people are usually hyper focused on other individuals, right? So very negative people, there's a lot of like social games, like power plays and weird, manipulation. It's all about other people. How can they interact with other people? How can they get something from other people? And the people you meet that are more individuated, that are more conscious, it's like they've built up enough of that in themselves that they don't need to siphon it from other people. In fact, they can take some and hand it out to other people if they want to. So they actually have enough. If you do get enough to where there's an overflow, you can actually just give it to people freely, and you don't have to siphon it from other people. That's why people like that can be isolated and be okay. I believe that's why monks can do that. Like most people, if they try to live on a monastery with the monks, they probably lose their mind. But I believe that they've cultivated so much of that energy that like it's okay. They don't need to like seek outside of themselves. So I believe that becoming conscious is actually like the right thing to do. So even if you think that you're not hurting someone else, remaining unconscious is negatively impacting the bigger picture and society around you. What's interesting is a lot of religions and a lot of cultures kind of believe that we live in some kind of like fallen world. Not that the world isn't like beautiful, but that there's almost like a negative nature to the world. You know, there's violence and there's just kind of a lot of darkness here. And if you think about it, you know, the system, nowadays people like to call it the matrix, it kind of keeps you unconscious. And that's kind of what consumerism is if you haven't taken enough conscious action to have that good energy inside of you, you have to reach out for external things to feel comfort, to kind of ease your anxiety. And that's how the matrix keeps functioning. It's like if unconscious people are like energy vampires, you know, the system that keeps people unconscious is like a large scale vampire. So instead of like on the individual level, it's like a collective energy vampire. It's actually really creepy. But with that being said, since you do live in a system that completely tries to set you up in every way to be unconscious, if you have made any progress physically, mentally, spiritually, to work on yourself, it's actually pretty amazing. As much as we like to think that like people back in the day were better than us, you know, and there's even like a notion that people now are lazy. There are a lot of lazy people now, I guess, but with the economy right now, I'd say Americans probably work more than ever, actually, if you really think about it. So if you do make any progress, even if it's just like going to the gym or anything at all, you should be like pretty proud of yourself. It's actually, it's more unlikely than you realize. It was not very likely that you would have made that progress. You know, I mean, everything around you is trying to make you unconscious and keep you that way. Sorry, I have some notes here. That's why I keep looking. Yeah, so actually, I want to talk about kind of that last thing I said, how we look at the past, like the people from the past were better than us, and that our current generation is just soft and lazy. I really don't believe that. So there's a Steve Jobs quote about nostalgia. He's basically talking about how nostalgia is an illusion. And he's saying, look, this world we live in was built by people that were just like you. Don't just sit around and think that you can't, you know, change the world. We are capable of that. And it's kind of like, you know, if you sit around waiting for it to happen, you know, for good things to happen, because someone else came up with a plan or someone else came along and helped you, you're just going to be waiting forever. So it's kind of like if you're the person in your friend group, you know, that comes up with the plans, it's probably because you know that if you don't come up with a plan, you might just sit and play Fortnite, you know? Like, so if if you're the person in the friend group that has to come up with the fun plans, it's probably for that reason. Well, society's the same way. It's like you need to come up with your own mission. And you need to look at it like that ship is going to sail with or without anyone or anything. That's how you truly become an individual, in my opinion. Individuation, becoming conscious, taking deliberate conscious action, right? So if you really have nostalgia for the past, and nostalgia is just an illusion, it's a complete, and it's fake. It's not real. The past isn't just magically better than the present. But just know that this present moment that you're in right now, one day you will have nostalgia for this. So it should only make the present more valuable. And I want to make a metaphor with Lord of the Rings. And even if you're not a Lord of the Rings fan, it's still going to make sense because this is very archetypal. So it's in a lot of stories. So even if you're not super deep into Lord of the Rings, or if you haven't seen it, don't worry. You'll still understand what I'm trying to say. So the thing I was saying about our generation seeing ourselves as like inferior to previous generations. So for those of you that don't know, Frodo Baggins is the main character in the trilogy Lord of the Rings, but Bilbo Baggins, his like uncle or something, is the protagonist in The Hobbit. And The Hobbit, you know, came first. It happened like a long time before the trilogy. So all Frodo knows about his uncle Bilbo is like, dang, when he was my age, he went out on an adventure. And I'm just here in the Shire. The Shire kind of represents like your youth and comfort, and yeah, just like comfort, but stagnation really. It looks beautiful on the outside, but really the Shire would be cool for like a week, but you wouldn't just want to stay there. The adventure is really what's fulfilling, even though the adventure is like nasty and crazy and dangerous and you might die. And if you think about it, I like to watch movies and shows as a metaphor for life. It just makes it more interesting for me. And it's like Frodo's in this world where he really seems kind of powerless. Like it seems like there's not anything he could do about the bigger picture. Like he's just a hobbit in the Shire. He doesn't even know what's going on in the world. But there comes a situation where there's an opportunity for him to do something. He doesn't know if it's going to work. And he's a hobbit, so he's not going to, pick up a sword and go like fight the war himself with a sword. He just has to do what he can. And, why? Why do it? The world he was living in was facing like destruction if no one did anything. Sauron, who you could think of as like basically Satan, was going to destroy everything he loved, but there was like something that Frodo could do to kind of be a thorn in Satan's side, to be annoying to Satan, to get in the way. And even if he didn't know it was going to work out, since there was something he could do, he just had to go for it. And he probably felt insecure because it seemed like when Bilbo went on his adventure, because Frodo wasn't there, he didn't see how messy it actually was. It seems like Bilbo just went out there and, mission accomplished in The Hobbit. And when Frodo leaves, he like almost dies every like 10 seconds. It's like he's like not built for this, He's kind of just like crawling through hell, trying to figure it out. But what he doesn't understand is that the time he's living the time that he's living in is way darker than the time that Bilbo had to go on his adventure. Bilbo lived in times of relative peace. Frodo was living in a time where Sauron was like really strong. Like Sauron represents Satan, and he was really strong and had built like a pretty big army and had a pretty good chance of conquering the world actually. And in some ways the past was more brutal. I mean, obviously, like we know that. Physically, especially with physical violence and the physical living conditions, like the past was harder. But I feel like right now, mentally and spiritually, it's pretty hard. It's pretty dark out here. And Satan, however you want to think about it, evil, Satan, whatever you believe in, has a pretty tight grip on reality right now. Not that it's hopeless. There's a lot of good going on right now. I think it's more good than bad. But, the armies of Sauron are kind of closing in. And it's easy to feel insecure, like, oh, I'm not like one of the guys from like the last generation or a few generations back that was like so tough and they fought in World War II and we're just sitting around playing video games. It's like, look, you can choose to look at it like that. Or you can do what Frodo did, which is basically, look, I don't know if there's a lot I can do, but if there's something I can do to be a thorn in the side of the Matrix, to be annoying to the Matrix, to help people, to prevent the future hell that I see coming. Because Frodo, at some point in the movies, I think it's like in the Fellowship of the Ring, he has like a vision of the Shire burning, and there's like, the orcs are like invading and killing everybody, and the Shire's burning down. And so he saw what was coming. And so it's like, it might not seem like there's a lot you can do, but what you can do will probably have a ripple effect and probably have more of an effect than you think. And guess what? If you don't do anything, it's coming either way. Like, evil doesn't take a day off. Bob Marley has a quote where he says, "Why should I take a day off when the forces of evil never do?" or something like that. Probably messing up that quote, but Evil doesn't take a day off. So like that future dystopia, that hell, that's coming if you don't do anything. Okay? And if you do something, maybe it still comes, but at least there's a chance that you can stop it. At least you give yourself a fighting chance. And Jordan Peterson talks about a concept of, the ripple effect, like I mentioned a second ago, where even if you're in isolation, like this kind of his thing about cleaning your room, I think, even if you're by yourself and it doesn't seem like you're directly helping people, taking any positive action will have a ripple effect. So back to conscious versus unconscious, try to take some conscious action to just do what you can. Tend to the part of the garden you can actually reach. And that will have a ripple effect and will affect other people positively, believe it or not. If you choose to just entertain yourself and you choose instant gratification, then that is the path of unconscious. And that's how you become an energy vampire eventually. And that's why people say there's no such thing as neutral. You're either on the side of good or the side of evil. And if you think you're neutral, you're on the side of evil. That's why they say that. So that's just something I want to get off my chest. I hope that wasn't too choppy. I feel like that was all over the place, but I'll have more on that in the future and maybe it'll be more clear. Welcome to the channel. Check out my first video of me talking, at least the first video of that. It's called Life is a Story. If you like this video, you should watch that one if you haven't seen it. Peace.